What's up, guys? I saw a very interesting video from Mama Teani. The video was posted on Facebook by Kumbu Studios. He posted this video of her. You might have seen her a couple of times on the Chris Network, and she was talking about the money subject of the Enigma whole thing. Now, I remember that's one topic that I didn't really get into because I was like, that's their thing. The money is for the people that are there. They can talk about that. But I want to talk about it because on how she addresses the subject here. And I want to remind, church structure is important. And when we look into the Bible, we can actually see how church structure was supposed to be very formula-like. When you are here, you do things like this. When you are here, you do things like this. So she made this video giving advice on how they should deal with the subject matter of money, and this is what she had to say.
Babu Motha, ngiyacela mfowethu ukuthi njengoba njena bekunikelwa enkonzweni kunemali ekhona ungayithathi lo mali uyidle wedwa mfowethu be yakho wedwa. Mkazele umfowenu uEnigma lo mali leyo. Nisebenze nobabili, nijuluke nobabili, ningalali nobabili. Mniku Enigma, ngeke uEnigma athole izinhlambe ezingaka bese qede wena uthatha imali yonke. uEnigma ubehamba eyoshona ku Chris Network eSoweto. Enza umsebenzi eqoqa abantu, usho ngamanye amagama noma ethi yena kalutho kodwa ubefana nomvangeli. Ngoba ibandla liyelagcwala eshumayela laphana etshela abantu ngokungcwele lapha ku Chris Network. Wena abantu masebefikile enkonzweni Babu Motha uyabashumayeza baba, siyakubona la ko YouTube, uyabashumayeza abantu, uyakungena imizi nemizi baba, uyabashumayeza abantu, uyababhabhadisa abantu baba. Wonke lo umsebenzi benisebenza nobabili. Azelanani baba, noma ngabi senti, noma ngabi 2 randi, omunye akatholi randi, omunye atholi randi.
This video, it was posted by Kumbu Studios on Facebook, okay? So you can go and watch the video by yourself over there. So, like I said, I'm going to pull the things that I'm saying directly from the Bible. So I'll give you examples of some of the things that happened in the Bible that show you. Remember, the Bible says, have those that model us, that have us as an example, okay? And so even in the subject of money, we do have certain things that happen in the apostle's life that gives an example. So a lot of people have been out of church for a very long time, and so they either don't know church structure or they don't have a reference for church structure. If you look at the Old Testament, church structure was very established. Not everybody did the service work. Not everybody did the service work of serving in the thing. It was a specific tribe that did that. Not even in that tribe, it's not everyone in the tribe that would do the service work of the offerings. There were specific people that were appointed to doing that. We have that in clarity. This is not something that starts now. It's something that came from the Old Testament. They had instruction on how they appeared and all these things within the Old Testament's structure. Who's serving, where, what, all that. The offerings that were given, there were certain offerings that were done for sin offering. There were certain offerings that they were brought to the temple, but they were like, for instance, the tithe. Mostly when people talk about the tithe, they think about there is one tithe. It isn't one tithe. It's not one tithe. The tithe is described in so many ways that today's church just has no context of the tithe. There was tithe you didn't even take to the temple. There was tithe you ate. But we're not talking about that. We're going to leave that one. subject of another thing. Now, when she's talking about here, saying, they should eat, just, share the money, Enigma was there preaching, and that's what brought people over, which they should think about him as an evangelist and stuff like that. No problem. Now let's get back to the subject matter. If a person isn't employed by the church and they bring people to the church, Where does it say they must be compensated financially? There's no such a thing. It's not there. You know, the pastor tells us to bring our neighbor. We bring our neighbor. We compensated because the person who we brought compensates something? No. So what that will do is it will bring favoritism. You don't want to do that. There is any compensation if the church has sat down and said, okay, we want to do this to help this person in this area for this and this, good and well, right? Remember, the pastor of a church is the one that still looks over that church. A local pastor of a church is the one that looks over the affairs of what happens in that church, right? And so it's important we remember that, you know, a person from outside can't just come and move things around in a local church. It doesn't work like that. The Bible in its description puts it out that these people were put there to look over the church. So we must remember that. The Bible says he calls them overseers of the flock. If the pastor decides with his church board, we're going to contribute this money, it's on the pastor. It's not something that we can come and say, hey, you should do this. Yes, there might be instances where we tried it, but you can't really tell the pastor of a local church who knows the financial state of that particular church and tell him what. It doesn't work like that. The local pastor should decide that, right? So now that we are clear on that. Secondly, I want to address the subject matter about the money. Okay? So now that we understand that a pastor of a local church has authority by the Bible to direct his congregation, the congregation that is under him. Now that we are clear about that, the second thing we want to bring back into here, when you look at contributions, how contributions are handled, contributions have a directive, right? This money is here for this, this money is here for this, this money is here for this. That's why sometimes when people, like you hear people in the world saying, oh, those people, they call multiple offerings. It's because they are not used to church or they don't understand church. You are talking to a worldly person. And so, yeah, they take offering 3 times. What do you expect them to say? Because they don't understand that a church might have different things that they give offerings for. So there may be people that have pledged, you know what, I want to do this type of giving every single month. And so they'll call out for pledges. Hey, if you have a pledge, on the basis of what the person has decided, that's where it comes from. Not the one way they are telling you what you must pledge. They will call that separately. Maybe because they have dedicated that to doing something, a specific thing. Then there's church building. Church building might not necessarily come from the account of the church. They might build an entire, they might have a separate fund for church building, whether it be fundraisings or whatever money is gathered from that and all that. So church can have that within their structure, right? And so and you do see what I'm talking about. If you read in the book of Acts, it's very clear when they sold the things that they had so that they can have equal, the money was specifically for that purpose, made so that everybody would have something on the table. So you see that in the Bible. Second case, you see when a fund is raised for a specific different thing. Paul speaks in the book of Hebrews chapter number 10. He speaks about a giving that was given particularly for him. And he speaks about a reward that God will give for people that did so, knowing that they had a reward in heaven. The Bible speaks about that. And then Paul later on as well also speaks about an offering that he had collected, particularly for the saints in Jerusalem. When they were having issues over there, he went and he got funds. I can't remember, is it Galatians or where is it? But he speaks about a church that he went and got donations specifically to a different church. Which money then was given so that it may be shared in that manner we are describing. Because people give for different things. Some people give just because they want the work of the ministry to continue. Some people give the money. If they were giving the money to a specific individual, why go through the church? I must not go to the person. Once church funds enter directly to the church, it creates complications, because now that money is now property of the church as a whole. It's not even the pastor's money. So what she's describing here, that's not church structure. That's not church structure. The money of the church does not even belong to the pastor. As a church grows, you will see this. In the book of Acts, you will notice then, there were certain things that the church was now taking care of, and to a point where they now appointed the deacons. When you read the scriptures at that period, the apostles, there were certain things that they were not supposed to put their hands into. Y'all be over there, do that. And then these ones were supposed to deal with matters of the table. It puts it like that. Right? Matters of tables and whatnots and stuff, whether it be food or whatever it was that needed a hand, the deacons were there to handle that. Yes, if the pastor and the church board say, you know what, we want to make a contribution towards this, yes, it is their right to do so. Right? But we must remember that the money as it enters the church thing, it's not even the pastor's money. Some churches have made a very big mistake, and they fell into this thing of saying, oh yeah, we have 50,000 in the bank account, and so because we have 50,000, let's find a 30,000 rent car and buy for the pastor. Big mistake. Big mistake. Big mistakes. This is what has brought a lot of people church hurt and what. It's brought from those type of things, those type of decisions. The money of the church is not the money for the pastor. Church is not there to be a benefit for the pastor. If Enigma is employed by the church, he earns a portion, whether it be compensation or whatever it is. You know, it makes sense in this way. If a church's finances are unstable, you can't ask for a salary. Be very careful of implementing things that are not realistic to your particular church congregation. Okay? So I wanted to explain these things just for people outside, because I have noticed this theme of people that don't understand church structure, that have a very wobbled perspective. Like you hear people angry about how a church uses its money. Yes, there are people that are wasteful. There are churches that are very wasteful in the way that they spend. Yes. And like I explained earlier on, there are certain things that are not done for the ease of the pastor. There are things we do for the body as a whole. Like you hear in Nigeria, in America, it's very popular in those two countries, where a pastor, the church money is used to buy the pastor a plane. What do you need a plane for? What do you need a plane? You know, a plane is the most expensive, one of the most expensive things you can. That thing costs money just to park it. Just parking it costs money. Church money is not the people. If we were to say, okay, no, those who evangelized and brought thingy, compensate them, will create a problem. That's not how. You create a problem. Especially if the person is not employed. If the person is employed by the church, we are working for the kingdom. We are not working. But anyways, y'all tell me your thoughts in the comment section. I think a lot of people just do not understand church structure. So I wanted to do to do this video is to remind there is structure to this thing. And the structure ought to be there for a reason. Okay? We should understand pastor has a right to determine where the funds go, what, but at the same time, the money is not the pastor's. So the pastor should not treat church money as his pocket. So we must be very careful when we deal with subjects like that, because those things are very well stated in the Bible, how we should think about them. The money is not the evangelist's money. The money is not the pastor's money. Once the money enters into the church, it is the church's money. And the church should use that money. You know, this is where you see that church funds are being misused. Like, for instance, in certain churches, they will do offering, tithes, they will collect all this money. Nothing ever goes out. When there's something they're supposed to do, when they want to do evangelism, instead of going and taking from the church's account, they'll go back and say, we want to raise money to do this event. Or we want to go. They keep going back to the people. So nothing ever comes out of the church's account. That's church funds being misused. There are business people who grew up in the church, became successful in that church. And so what happens is that it has brought up a lot of things. I remember speaking to a pastor, and he spoke about how a lot of the businesses that actually bring a lot of funds into the church were people that came there, maybe young. Those guys then grew up to a point where they built businesses, and then that's now the success that you see. So the big donations that the church gets, it's not because they are just there busy sucking money out of people's pockets. No, it's because they have grown people who have gone to be business people, successful businesses. And now it's not the person who tithes, it's now the businesses that tithe. So churches like that have huge pockets. I've spoken to many pastors, and that was the case in their conversations. And so the conversation concerning money with those particular churches and other churches, it's going to be different. So many people, they tend to have this rigid do this list, and especially unbelievers. I don't see why even unbelievers even bother trying to comment about things like that. You'll hear people saying, oh no, why is the church building a church like this? Where do you fit with what that church wants to? Where do you fit there? Where? You know, because it's good in their space. But because people don't understand church structure and all of those things, those things they might not have in context. The money is not the pastor's money. The money is not. If they are compensated, they are compensated. But to say we are going to take the money and give it to these two people, that is church misuse of funds. If a person is donating money to the church, it's not the pastor's money. Let's get that straight. But y'all tell me your thoughts in the comment section. It's Ricky. Want to hear your thoughts concerning that.